just not abused.
Yeah, well, that's what my big concern is. Who oversees that?
Right. And speaking of this mandate relief, just this week, the Board of Regents has said that they are going to parcel out school aid, or attempt to poorest districts first, getting the lion's share. Now, since you are the assemblyman for a district that has many very wealthy school districts, you know they are going to scream bloody murder when that aid goes down farther if the Board of Regents and the governor do this. Is this a dead-on-arrival proposal?
I don't think it's a dead-on-arrival. I think, look, even in our district, we recognize that we are very, very blessed. We have tremendous affluence in this district, and as such, we also have tremendous schools, and we pay for them. My argument has always been that the school funding formula was inherently flawed. We make more, we spend more. I got it. But if you make 50% more, you shouldn't spend 250% more. I still think the formula needs to be readjusted. However, having said that, the poorest districts with the greatest demonstrated need will get that money first. That's just the way it is. And I don't think anyone I talked to, when I talked to my school superintendents, because I met with them the other day, were in disagreement with that. What they would like to see, truly, our school superintendents, because they're good educators and they're hardworking individuals, what they would like to see is the type of mandate relief that doesn't put them behind the eight ball. Because as you know, out of every taxpayer's $100 per $100 of tax money for their property tax, about 70 of that $100 is school tax. And of course, if you're an empty nester and you have no children in the school system, you're paying to educate other people's children, which is fine. Most of us are generous and are willing to pay our share of that. But what we don't want to do is pay a disproportionate share, and that share has been disproportionate because we at the state, we've met the enemy, he is us. The state, the state created this problem. It's up to us in the state to fix this problem. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to get elected. And we're working towards that mandate relief. So let me segue back into, at the end of the last session, we passed the omnibus bill. That bill contained the tax cap, which I agreed with, minuscule mandate relief, which I did not agree with because we needed substantive short and long-term mandate relief.
Correct.
And, of course, the rent control component, which, for those people who don't know it, even though we have the wealthiest district in the state here, we have 4,700 rent control apartments and 38 rent control buildings within the 89th Assembly District. So I have to be sensitive to those of my constituents in that area. So I voted for that. I was not happy with the component of the mandate relief. It was $127 million statewide. Should have been $1.27 billion. It did not give our municipalities and or our school districts any kind of substantive relief, which they needed. So my belief is what we need to focus on right now, going back up there, is that type of mandate relief. As you know, Assemblywoman Amy Paulin and myself are co-sponsors on a bill to relieve the counties of Medicaid costs and take that back to the state to phase it in over a number of years. The governor has already signaled his desire not to do that.
Yeah, I'm curious about that. Will that bill be dead on arrival?
I'd like to hope that it wasn't. As with all these things, you start out with a premise, and then what you do, as with all things that actually get done and done well up there, you have a dialogue and you create compromise. You don't reach an impasse, as we see sometimes done in Congress. People talk to each other. They decide, okay, you know what? Well, look, I'll give a little on this one. You give a little on that one. We'll come together. At the end of the day, maybe you got 80% of what you thought we should have. You got 80%. We didn't all get 100%, but we're 80% further than we all thought we were going to be when we started. So I see the ability for that compromise between Republicans and Democrats. And as I said, with the leadership of our new governor, who I will tell you I'm very, very pleased with and very impressed by.
So a touchy-feely guy to work with?
I wouldn't go so far as to say he's a touchy-feely guy. I get along with him personally. As a matter of fact, I just got a note from him congratulating me and sending me birthday wishes because my birthday is tomorrow.
Happy early birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
How did we know that?
Thank you.
See, our producers just are on top of stuff like that.
But he's a good man. I enjoy working with him. It's an honor to know him. He has been very gracious to me. And, as I've said this before, you run politically, but you must serve apolitically. I don't look upon him as the Democratic governor. He's the governor of the state of New York. I don't see myself as a Republican.
He thinks he is too, actually.
Well, but
according to a quote in the New York Times, he is the government.
He is. He's the governor of the state of New York, and he should, he's the chief executive. He needs to be allowed to run his government. And I support that. It's not a partisan thing. It's common sense. It's the way good government works. It's the way our taxpayers want us to work.
Yes, but the legislators had no idea the surprise Andrew Cuomo tax cut was in the works.
Well,
they had no idea, right?
There was an inkling of it sometime prior to that, but it was rumor central. It was not someone came in a fully transparent situation. We all sat down and hashed this out and had a great debate over it. And it is the nature of the way things work in Albany, and that's the real flaw that has to be fixed.
I see.
The 3 men in a room concept.
The tribunal.
The tribunal, as we're referring to it these days.
How is the state set up going forward into the 2012-13 budget, which you'll be wrestling with when you get back? What is the expected deficit? Is revenue growing? The tax cuts notwithstanding? Is Governor Cuomo and the legislature crossing their fingers?
Okay, I think let's take it from the numbers, first of all. It looks like the expected deficit will be under $2 billion, and that, as I said, we would anticipate closing by virtue of savings and cuts at various different areas. Now, we did a lot of cutting the last time, and we cut a lot of the fat. Now the question is, are we going to be cutting muscle and bone? And, I would strongly advise all my colleagues, let's look at cutting with a scalpel, not with an axe here, because there are a lot of worthy programs that do require funding.
But when it comes down on the Westchester County, or say the White Plains City School District, the people who enjoy the services provided by mandates from the state that are cut, they're going to scream. And so therefore it'll probably be restored and property taxes will go up. Do you foresee that happening? I see it.
Let me say this to you.
Yeah.
I think I've seen personally, a very different attitude in this last year than I did the first year I was up there. And that attitude exists and predominates everywhere in the discussion, including with the unions. As you know, our two biggest unions, PEF and CSEA, accepted unprecedented contracts, 0, 0, 0, 2 and 2% for 5 years, with some additional give-backs. That took
no
a lot.
Layoffs, right?
Yeah, and
In
no
return
layoffs.
for no layoffs.
Yeah,
No
that
layoffs.
means how can you save?
But
Yeah.
I got to tell you something. That took a lot of courage from the leadership of those unions and from the rank and file to do that, and I thank them for that because we recognize we all have to tighten our belt. We didn't want to put anyone on a breadline in the worst economy since the Great Depression, but I will tell you, the governor had indicated, had those contracts not been negotiated the way they were, there would have been 3,400 layoffs, and I, for one, will tell you he meant it. This was not a bluff. It was a negotiating ploy. There were going to be 3,400 people without jobs, and I was not happy about that. So I encourage people in the union, said, guys, look, you got to relook at this, and please think about being willing to tighten your belt on this one.
And I see we're getting ready to go down that road here in Westchester County with
Surely.
Rob Astorino and, again, up at the Westchester Medical Center under CEO Michael Israel. He has asked for this, they both have asked for the unions to start meeting them a portion of the way. But it seems that all parties have drawn a line in the sand down here, and that's going to be quite a story as it comes out.
I maybe I suffer from terminal naivete, but personally I think there's a lot of good people here. I know Rob Astorino. He's a good friend. I know Ken Jenkins. I know Peter Harcum. And I will tell you that Republicans on that side of the aisle said in this last process to me that they showed great leadership and worked in a very cooperative atmosphere with our county executive. And I want to take my hat off to all of them for doing that. That's what we expected as citizens in good government, and that's what they gave us. If you look at the idea, you're looking at more than 1,000 line items here. 27 items that are vetoed is minuscule in the amount. And whether they do or don't get withheld, the point is, it says to me that there were 1,000 other things they reached consensus on. And that's what people have to recognize, not the 27.
It seemed like a play, though, to me.
But
he cuts, they restore. Happens every year.
Well, it can be, but of course now, as you know, the supermajority has been broken with the last couple of elections, and because of that, there is enough to sustain a veto if, in fact, that turns out to be the thing. I don't think you make the veto a cause celeb. I think at the end of the day, all the parties here, Republicans, Democrats, are interested in good government.
Exactly.
And they're doing what in their heart they believe is right. And they are talking, which is the most important thing. They are talking. They're communicating. And as I said, there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I don't think it's a train.
Tappan Zee Bridge. Where's the money going to come from to build that $5.2 billion bridge now that the governor has backed off from his funding it out of union pension funds?
Well, I think, as you know, we were offered some money from the Obama administration relative to fast-tracking that. I am along with those people who believe that we have to consider mass transit as an option. You know, people said, well, okay, we can do that with if you remember, the George Washington Bridge. It happened, the bridge happened, the mass transit's still not there. Personally, I think if we're going to have to do it, let's do it. Let's bite the bullet, do it once, do it right. And I think a lot of that money would probably come from the federal government for infrastructure development. Where we would get the state contribution of that, and that is kind of premature at this point. I would assume that would be one of the mechanisms they would look at.
Yeah.
But you know, obviously we want to see what we get from the federal government out of this thing. But I think we all agree the bridge is crumpling. It's outlived its usefulness. There comes to a point now where, while it is safe, and talking to the engineers, they tell me the bridge is safe, but it is obsolete. It needs to be redone, and it needs to be redone before it becomes unsafe.
I got news for you. This girl's not going across that bridge.
I see.
Even though the Palisades Mall is on the other side.
We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Turning to the fracking situation. Just this week, the EPA down in Washington announced that there is evidence that contamination of groundwater has been linked to fracking out in Pavilion, Wyoming. Now, how does this affect the state debate on fracking? It's something that you've been following very closely. The governor obviously wants to frack, you know, the question is, where does this leave us? Are we going to study this more in depth with these revelations?
Well, you know, let me say this to you. The gas has been in the ground, John, for 288 million years.
Yeah.
It can stay there another 6 months to a year until we find out if we can do this safely.
Right.
As you probably know, I'm the co-sponsor on the moratorium against fracking.
Right.
And let me say this, as somebody who believes in business and believes in development, I'd love to have that gas. But the caveat is, not at the cost of our water supply. That is not an acceptable option to lose our environment as a result of this short-term development strategy. So what most of us have said, who are being pragmatic, is like, you know what, we're not saying don't take the gas. We'd love to have it. We'd love whatever economic development we can get out of it, and jobs and so on. But the caveat is, until you prove that there is a safe methodology, if it is fracking or a variation on that, to extract it from the ground without destroying the aquifers, without destroying our water supply, without putting carcinogenic chemicals in the ground, most of which may not come up, and then with plants that are not right now capable of dealing with the slag that's coming out of there, we want to wait until we have enough scientific evidence to let the science make the decision for us, not the emotion of the issue. Because, you know, it takes almost 8 million gallons to frack one well. Forget anything else. Where you getting 8 million gallons times hundreds of wells?
Well, we'll have to leave that right
the
there.
frack?
That's right. John Bailey, thank you. Nancy King
Thank
being
you.
with us. Bob Castelli, always a pleasure
Always
having
a
you on the show.
pleasure.
And thank you. And
Thank
John
you.
Bailey
Yes,
saying
thank
good
you.
night.
Wonderful holiday.
Peter Katz and Jim
Thank you.
Benerofe, wherever you are. And good night for White Plains Week.
White Plains Week has been a presentation of White Plains CitizenNet Reporter, WPCNR.com, in cooperation with Channel 76. Comments may be emailed to WPCNR@AOL.com. The copyrighted print White Plains Cityscape by Leonard Weber is used courtesy of the White Plains Presbyterian Church. For information on its availability, you may contact the church at 761-8585. The views and opinions expressed on the preceding program were solely those of the participants. White Plains Week is presented Fridays at 7:30 and again on Mondays at 7 p.m. here on Channel 76. For White Plains Week, this is Seth Benerofe speaking.